Welcome back. Well, a Senate inquiry has been underway this week into the ABC's outsourcing of program production to the private sector. Those against the practice say it takes jobs away from government employees and lowers the standard of programming. But those in favour claim it's better for the industry as a whole and allows the ABC to deliver niche programming it simply doesn't have the internal resources to make. Managing Director Mark Scott also denies claims it just serves to funnel public taxes to the private sector.
If the ABC makes an internal production, and it's 100% internal production, the only money we can use is money that the ABC can contribute. However, in working with the independent production sector, in some genres, you might get money from Screen Australia, a state-based body. You might get money from the producer rebate, and the producer themselves might put in money. And so for the ABC's dollar invested, you might get another $1 or $2 or $3, or in documentaries and factual history, $6 to put to air. That allows us to do more Australian production, Senator, more Australian production of high quality, because whether we're doing it internally or whether we're doing it in co-production is all done to the same standards that is set down and spelt out.
James, Mark Scott's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place on this issue, I think. But, you know, a lot of criticism and people coming out during this inquiry using shows like At Home with Julia and saying, well, you know, if they didn't outsource, those sort of programs would never be made and then we wouldn't have all this hoo-ha about whether they should or not. But, you know, some of the ABC favourites, Enough Rope, for example, has come from outside contributors.
Yeah, I think surely it's a combination, you know. You go for what the best programs are, not for who's going to make them. You know, you pick and choose, and if there's good ideas internally, okay, you use them. And when you get pitch stuff that as he said, you know, the finance structure makes it more workable to use an outsourced.
It's kind of, you know, I guess it's easy
company.
for people to sit outside television and say, oh, you know, you should do this yourself. You should make, you know, it's expensive. It's really expensive to make television. And if you can, you know, I suppose bring good television in cheaper, as Mark Scott was saying, than what you can do it yourself, then surely everybody wins. But it's been quite contentious, this one.
Well, during its tough years, look at the model Network 10 had. They virtually outsourced all its production to the independent sector when it was really cutting back after its years in receivership, and that was just a more economical model for them.
All right. Well, to England's version of Auntie, BBC Worldwide Australia has launched the version of its iPlayer, an app with 1,000 hours of television already locked and loaded. But unlike, for example, the ABC's iView, this one isn't designed to be a catch-up service. Rather, it offers access to the BBC library. James spoke with the BBC's Tony IFFLAND and asked how the local version compares to the one available in the UK and Europe.
Quite substantially, actually, James, as you would expect. A couple of primary differences. One is that it's not a catch-up service to the BBC's network of 8 broadcast channels and radio channels. It's distinctly a VOD package, a subscription VOD package, tailored for the local market. And the other part being the commercial part of the BBC. It's not a free service. It will be a paid-for service.
What is the cost to the subscriber?
Okay, so as you said, we've already launched in 11 territories throughout Europe, and so as part of the global pricing policy with Apple, the Australian price will be $9.49 per month. And then there's a yearly subscription at $89.99. So you get a choice of going monthly or taking a yearly subscription at a discount.
What sort of BBC content won't we get to see?
Look, as you say, Australia's enormous territory for us in our content supply. We have a large sales business here, we have a large channels business here, and we have a large home entertainment business. But we could see, given the engagement that Australian audiences have with our content, we could see that there was still pent-up demand from people who are Anglophiles, expats that are here, and just the Australian population that really engages with our content. We could see that there was a demand for a VOD service. You can't, when you have a catalogue as large as the BBC's, not everything is in active use at any time. And so this service really does mine the classic part of the service. There's some contemporary programming, and always mindful of our existing relationships across all those broadcast platforms.
What were the rights challenges? Had the BBC been preparing for this by sort of writing contracts with this in mind?
Look, I'm not overly familiar with the way things go, but it's a lot easier now. I go back a long time with the BBC. I remember when we launched, beta and VHS into Australia, and in those days you went back and asked for specific rights with talent. I think it's got easier in the sense that technology has moved so far and there's so many multiple uses. So, but it is very much a matter of keeping all the rights holders, the equities and writers and musicians and the agents and that across what your broad plans are for exploitation of content, that they understand that this is always additive to the supplier programming, and therefore additive to them as key creatives to have their content out there and being paid for.
Is this a model other broadcasters or even content suppliers could follow?
Look, it was very attractive to us with the catalogue that we had, the brand that we have. Look, I think everyone will be watching. This is a pilot for us, so we're about learning from this experience as well. So I suspect that lots of people will be watching how successful this is, just as we will be watching and measuring how this goes.
Is the content available ad-free?
The way it's structured is that you download the app for free, and when you download the app you get access to about 10 hours of content. That content will carry pre and post rolls, so that will carry advertising. Once you subscribe and go behind the paywall, no, there won't be any advertising on the service.
Are other platforms under consideration, whether it be Android, perhaps a PC alternative, or smartphones?
Not in trial phase, no. The trial is definitely around the iPad. Maybe extensions to iPhones, that would be a natural extension, but I'm not aware of that at the moment. But we will reassess all those things at the end of the trial phase and decide exactly what shape this might have moving forward.
Tony IFFLAND there speaking with James Manning, who magically is right next to me in the studio. James, let's check in on some of the other news that's been around the sector this week. It's been pretty busy. I want to start with Merrick Watts. Now, it's always been Merrick and Rosso, and then there was a bit of a, I don't know how you'd put it, but
one left and one stayed, yeah.
And now they're both coming back in the game, but different gigs.
Yeah, and we spoke recently about how Rosso's just signed to Australian Radio Network to host Mick's Sydney Breakfast. Rosso's now come back. He's only been off air 3 weeks, and he's already negotiated a new deal with Triple M. For someone who's been doing breakfast for 10 years, the drive hours must be very attractive because you sort of get your morning at home, you work in the afternoon, you're home for dinner. So it's a pretty good gig. The dollars usually aren't as lucrative as doing breakfast radio, of course, but I think he's probably got a pretty good deal here through his manager, Kevin White. Would negotiate pretty hard with Southern Cross Austereo because the show's going Sydney, Brisbane live on delay into Melbourne and Adelaide, and then sort of throughout the network of all their regional stations.
So is it just him by himself, or is he? Right,
yep,
okay.
Yep, just him by himself.
And they're quite different. I mean, Mix and Triple M are quite sort of a different feel.
Sure, so. And Nova to Triple M too, But he said, look, it's sort of rock, sport and comedy are their three sort of trademarks these days, And he said, look, all of those things fit just perfectly with him.
And Rosso's obviously mellowed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else has been happening? The Radio Awards. Take us through some of the key winners there.
Yeah, no, they're coming up, so not far away.
Get your crystal ball out. Tell us. That's what I meant to say.
Kelsey Graham. I'll predict Hamish and Andy will win something.
Right, okay.
That's usually a pretty safe bet. And they're coming back from their New York sojourn finishes this week. They'll be back for the awards. Kelsey Grammer's coming out. They have a sort of celebrity guest, usually from the US, every year. Kelsey Grammer will be out at their conference on the Fridays the day before, co-hosting the awards night when Amanda Keller will be helping him out.
Okay. Now, interesting that Pacific Star, there's been an ASX announcement to do with a deal with Macquarie. Yeah,
that 3MTR, Macquarie sort of alerted the market some time ago, look, they've lost $6 million on that 3MTR venture in Melbourne. They haven't sort of said they wanted to pull out, but they're certainly going to review the investment, intimating they'll probably pull out. There hasn't been sort of negotiation of where that's going, so Pacific Star just wanted to sort of alert the market, look, we haven't settled on what's going to happen. For the time being, the station will sort of keep going. It's hard to know what they'll do there because it's been a pretty big flop, that whole venture, so, they'd have to change the format pretty drastically, I think, to attract some listeners.
Looking ahead to next week's ratings, I'm sure if you've got your crystal ball out there, there'd be some football games winning in those, because we've got the AFL Grand Final and the Rugby League Grand Final this weekend. Now with AFL, Geelong and Collingwood, we've got the players all out there practising for the final round, but this is also the final round for 10.
Yeah, after 10 years, 10 lets go of the rights this time around. Will also be the last grand final 7 won't have, because they've got it. They're going to have it every year exclusively, the grand final, the only game of the year they'll have exclusively. Interestingly, the game, if you want to see it in high definition live, you're going to have to go overseas, because ESPN will show it in HD, but you can't watch it here in HD until it's a replay on Fox Sports.
Odd.
Unusual, isn't it?
Now, while we're on AFL, the Brownlow, so we had the Brownlow earlier this week from memory, and there was a few noses out of joint about who got access to the blue carpet.
Yeah, 1.13 million it did for 7. Very good. The way they alternate the rights, if you don't get the AFL Grand Final, the other rights holder gets the Brownlow medal, so you have some sort of football action in that last week. The main disgruntlement amongst the journalists was that their space on the they call it a blue carpet wasn't very big. They were all squashed into this one little space. Too much sort of attention was given to the TV rights, and they got all the room. So they're sort of negotiating for a bit of better coverage next year. This
is interesting. Another move in the Choppergate scandal, if you'd call it that, from Queensland?
Yeah, after the Choppergate thing, 3 journalists sort of got the axe up there at Channel 9 Brisbane. Lee Anderson, the news director, resigned. So 9 have just sort of finally found a replacement. Mike Dalton's moving back up to Queensland, where he comes from, to take over the newsroom there.
Okay. We've got a list of the top 10 grossing Australian films of all time, and some good news for the makers of Red Dog, which is a lovely little film, and it's made it
squeezed its way into the top 10. Yeah, it's pushed past the Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which has lost its top 10 slot. It's a pretty exclusive club too. People like Baz Luhrmann's got 3 movies in that top 10. George Miller, the director's got 2 Crocodile Dundee movies. So it's a tight little club to get into.
Alrighty, that's probably enough for the news, but we need to take a look at the ratings for week 39 in free-to-air. 2.5 Men dominating the top 5 in 1st, 2nd and 5th. Packed to the Rafters came in 3rd, and the X Factor Monday in 4th place. 7 News Sunday in the top spot. There's the first 5, followed by Tuesday's X Factor. Underbelly Razor in 8th, coming on Sunday night. That was in at 9. I'm getting my numbers all mixed up. And in the AFL, Collingwood versus Hawthorn rounded out the top 10. We better just move straight on to subscription television, also week 39. Sport programs first. Rugby World Cup, no surprises there. New Zealand v France in at first, followed by the Australia v USA match. The cricket, Sri Lanka v Australia in 3rd, followed by AFL on the couch and the AFL All-Australian Awards in at number 5 this week. In the non-sport genre, Australia's Next Top Model in the top spot, followed by Rove LA and Glee in at 3rd. The Simpsons in 4th, and Family Guy rounding out the top 5. James, what was all this talk earlier in the week about Rove not rating well?
Yeah, well, there's just lots of different ways you can cut and dice the ratings figures, as we've sort of seen in the past. Free-to-air people put out figures that make them look good, and they were putting out some figures which showed an average of all the times Rove had been on, because it's repeated like late night, early morning, stuff like that. But it's still ranking quite well, and it's sort of primary screenings on a Monday night on Fox 8 or on Fox 8 Plus 2 if you want to watch it a little bit later in the evening. Still holding up reasonably well.
Okay, well, coming up in the next week, we've got Apple. They've announced already the latest iPhone. I think that's coming out, iPhone 5, later this week. Amazon have unveiled a new colour Kindle. And the biggest news of the week, Mediaweek, now available on the iPad.
On your iPad, Kylie. The whole thing completely.
Straight to the App Store tonight. That's all we have time for in this edition of Mediaweek. James and I will be back next week. Thanks for your company.